You have rendezvous with information, same time, same channel, every day on Label TV, your Pan-African channel. But before we open, get the headlines. An uncertain future for Robert Mugabe. Thousands of Zimbabweans took the streets of Harare to demand the departure of the 93-year-old, gradually abandoned by his most faithful allies. A mobilization supported by the army that took this week control of the country. Next, Africa's social media and the world as a whole are under shock after the publication by CNN of an investigative video on slave trade in Libya. Alpha Blondy, as many others, has reacted to this and calls on the African Union and ECOWAS to take action. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and once more welcome on your Pan-African channel. We open this newscast with Zimbabwe as thousands of protesters of Zimbabwean protesters descended yesterday and today, November 19, 2017, in the streets of Harare to demand the departure of the President Robert Mugabe, gradually abandoned by most of his allies, as you got it in the headlines, a mobilization supported by the army who took control of the country during the week. Watch the details. Too much is too much. Mugabe must leave. Rest in peace, Mugabe. No to the Mugabe dynasty. Could one read on signs held by demonstrators? The anti-Mugabe demonstrations, which began on Saturday morning peacefully, end a week of unprecedented political crisis in Zimbabwe, where the army took control of the country and placed under house arrest the head of state in power since 1980. The intervention of the army represents a turning point in the long reign of Robert Mugabe, marked by the repression of all opposition and a serious economic crisis. Note that about 90% of the labor force is unemployed. At the age of 93, the world's oldest incumbent head of state finds himself increasingly isolated, abandoned by his most valuable allies. After the army and veterans, the regional sections of the presidential party of ZANU-PF in turn dropped it Friday night and asked for his departure. The protesters responded to the call of Zimbabwe's veterans, key players in political life and civil society movements, including Pastor Ewan Mawariri's The Flag Movement, a key player in a repressed anti-Mugabe sling in 2016 by the security forces. The soldiers were present Saturday in the streets of Harare, but this time the protesters greeted them and shook hands with them. Some even brandished portraits of the Chief of Staff, General Constantino Chiwenga, who fully supports the demonstrations. On the night of Tuesday to Wednesday, the army intervened without bloodshed in Harare in support of Emmerson Mnangagwa, sacked a week earlier from his post of vice president. Also, yesterday, Friday, Robert Mugabe made his first public appearance since the military coup at the university graduation ceremony in Harare. Apparently, allowing him to leave the presidential residence, the army intends to treat him with dignity and respect, the time to find a way out of the crisis. With the intervention of the army, Emmerson Mnangagwa, who fled the country after his eviction, returned to Zimbabwe on Thursday. He has not yet appeared in public, but his name is circulating to take the lead of a possible political transition. Today, Saturday, protesters waved his portrait. Ladies and gentlemen, breaking news, last-minute crucial information. The ZANU-PF issues ultimatum to Robert Mugabe to resign by noon tomorrow, Monday, or face impeachment proceedings. It's impeachment proceedings, I meant to say, on Tuesday when Parliament resumes. The party fired Mugabe as its chief and expelled his wife as a leader of the party's Women's League and other top officials loyal to the president. Also, Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was recently sacked by the president of Zimbabwe, was reinstated and is to head the party from now. Furthermore, in the same line, we move in brief and images. The influential Youth League of ZANU-PF, Zimbabwe's ruling political party, urged today the head of state Robert Mugabe to resign from the country's presidency and demanded the expulsion of his wife Grace of the party. We demand the expulsion of Mrs. Grace Mugabe from ZANU-PF forever and demand that President Robert Mugabe resign from his position as president and first secretary of the party and the post of the president of the Republic of Zimbabwe, said the League in a statement. The League also strongly condemned the expulsion of the party and the government, and from the government of Emmerson Mnangagwa, former vice president, who has just been reinstated, and recommended that he immediately be reinstated as it was done. Now let's talk about this misfortune in Senegal. A violent fire ravaged a large area of Pekin neighborhood, a city in the northern suburbs of Dakar, the capital. The fire against, which the firefighters were still fighting at midday, caused extensive damage to the high voltage lines, depriving much of the Senegalese capital of electricity. Watch the story. The fire started very early last Friday morning around 4 a.m. local time in the Lambaye Park, an area dedicated to the storage of wood and furniture in Pekin in the northern suburbs of Dakar. Unfortunately, the flames spread extremely fast. The Senegalese firefighters intervened with the help of their French counterparts, who came to reinforce at the end of the morning. By midday, the fire soldiers were still hard at work in the face of devouring flames, but the situation was under control. Nevertheless, due to this misfortune, traders have lost everything. Millions and billions have gone on fire. He also points to the difficulty of intervention inherent in the anarchic occupation of this vast area of Pekin. These are small streets. Even to pass a cart, it is not obvious, which complicates the interventions, notes the young man. According to the preliminary findings, only material damages are to be deplored, but the high voltage cables have been affected, causing a power outage in most of Dakar since Friday morning at dawn. In a statement, the Senelec National Electricity Company explained to have set up a rotating load shedding pending the return to normal without giving details of the deadlines. In the same line, but now from Dakar to Cameroon in Bamenda, according to the police, at least 4 people, including a police officer, were injured in Bamenda, the epicenter of the English-speaking crisis in western Cameroon, during the night of Saturday to Sunday, during which several shots were heard. A source close to the security services said a police officer was shot in the night at the food market during clashes between the police and radicals. This same source confirms that the policeman is under care, but his days seems not to be in danger. Also, in the emergency room of the city hospital, 2 wounded civilians, men were taken care of this morning. One of them say he was near the home at around 10 p.m. He was near his home at around 10 p.m. when the police started firing. He took a stray in his right leg and claims that he does not know the reason why the police was shooting. The second wounded man said he was beaten by policemen when he was in the neighborhood where he had an appointment with the opposition leader Nijan Frundi, whose fief is in Bamenda. We now move on in this newscast. Accused of having carried out activities detrimental to the security and public order, the South African Stephen Blewett is ordered to leave the Beninese territory by the 24th November at latest. Get the details in this report. 1 week after the opening, on November 7, of a sanctioned procedure in Benin against the local subsidiary of the South African operator MTN by the Regulatory Authority for Electronic Communications and Posts, in short ARCEP, on November 14, Benin's Ministry of Interior issued a decree directing to its Director General to leave the country. According to this document, Stephen Blewett, a former TCM trade director in Namibia who took up his post in Cotonou in August 2015, is accused of having carried out activities prejudicial to security and public order. he must have left the territory by November 24th at the latest. The granting of any residence permit is formally prohibited in its regard, specifies Article 2 of the Ministerial Order. To date, MTN Benin has still not received communication to this effect, said the general direction of the company in a statement widely relayed by the Beninese press. According to MTN, the government's decision is based on unfounded allegations. Now let's talk about education. In September 2019, the Moroccan economic capital should host 2 new campuses, one in the city center consisting of a business school and a school of architecture, and the other in the periphery offering training in the rail and naval sectors. Watch the details in the story. Already endowed with a campus of 27 hectares in the capital, the International University of Rabat would enrich in September 2019 new campuses in Casablanca. Discussions are underway with the Wilaya of Casablanca Citat to determine the site of establishment. We think of 2 campuses, one in the city center, composed of a business school and a school of architectures, the other outside the city, said Noureddin Mouadib, president of this private-owned public university founded in 2006. The latter wishes to decline training in line with the characteristics of the Greater Casablanca employment area, including sectors related to the railway and naval sectors. Combined, these 2 sites in Casablanca could accommodate between 5,000 and 6,000 students, while the Rabat campus now has 3,400 students. And the leaders are considering the latest settlements in Marrakesh and Tangier. Recognized by the Moroccan state, the UIR is also at the forefront of applied research with 243 patents filed since its creation. As announced in the headlines, Africa and Africans as a whole are under alert. Legendary Ivorian musician of reggae, Alpha Blondy, known in private life as Seydou Kone, has again waded into the debate that occurs about the sub-Saharan African leaders to help protect their citizens wherever they find themselves. Listen to the story. His recent calls to the African Union and the West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS to take decisive action on migrant abuse in the North African country of Libya. Blondy was reacting to a recent investigation by the American channel CNN on the strife and hustle that migrants in the country at the hands of their captors and traffickers. In a Facebook post titled "To Presidents of the African Union and ECOWAS," he wrote a message in French, a translation of which is as follows. Let me apologize for telling you that we are Africans who count on you to protect us. We are surprised and amazed at your silence over the humiliating and unacceptable situation that your nationals, brothers, sisters, our sons and daughters are sold as slaves in Libya, member of the African Union. You and your information services must have seen CNN reporting on slave auction of your nationals in captivity in Libya at the very moment I'm talking to you. What are you waiting for before you respond and intervene? But what are you waiting for? I am very disappointed by the fact that the African Union allowed Colonel Gaddafi to be killed. He said, the African Union exists, but it is France that has to protect Mali. What is the role of the African Union if the African Union is not capable of defending the African interest? What is their role? Blondy is on record to have called on the AU to address issues of rising conflicts across the continent. He is also a US ambassador for peace for his native Côte d'Ivoire. He describes this cry as one which comes from the heart and insists that this is not a call to violence but a call for action. That is that for this information, and we hope that the institutions and the leaders of Africa should react to this issue in the continent. Now let's move on, and we now talk about information in the rest of the world. US civil rights activist Jesse Jackson announced this weekend that he has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, an ailment that concerns movement and gets progressively worse with time. More information in the story. In a statement issued by the Chicago-based Rainbow Push Coalition, which he founded, the 76-year-old minister said he reluctantly sought medical attention after his ability to move and perform routine tasks became increasingly difficult over a 3-year period. Parkinson's disease occurs when a certain nerve cells breaks down and reduce the amount of the chemical dopamine that sends signals to the part of the brain that controls movements, according to WebMD.com. Note that the disease progresses slowly and treatment can slow it down even more. Jackson has been a leader for the U.S. civil rights movement since the mid-1960s and was with Martin Luther King when he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968. Jackson said he planned to advocate to find a cure for the disease, which he said we could bested my father, strike 60,000 Americans a year and afflict 7 to 10 million people worldwide. He also said he is writing his memoir. He twice sought the Democratic presidential nomination and has acted as an emissary to secure the release of Americans held abroad. Time for sporting news. The DR Congo is a land of large pool of talented players. Many agents tour the country in search of great talent for contracts in European Championship. Gauthier Perchano gives us a summary.
The Championship of Belgium is one of those in Europe which welcomes the most foreigners in general and Africans in particular. The Congolese are not necessarily the most numerous, but because of the history that binds their country to Belgium, they remained firmly anchored in the reality of Belgium. The DRC has a large pool of players, explains a very known agent who worked extensively in this part of Africa in the 1980s and 1990s. Since the signing of Léon Mokuna, the first Congolese to play in Belgium, and that was in Ghent in 1957, the flow never stopped thanks to agents who quickly crisscrossed the country in search of players at the level. Of course, you have to travel to watch matches, but also to have local relays. The Congolese territory is particularly large, says the agent. The Italo-Belgian Fabio Baglio has been very active in the country. He is behind the recruitment for RSC and elect attackers Dieu Merci Mbokani, ex-player of Tout-Puissant Mazembe in 2006, and Junior Kabangana Kalunji, ex-MK Sealing in 2010. The two footballers are now respectively involved in Ukraine with Dynamo Kiev and in Kazakhstan with FC Astana.
We thank the English newsroom and the technical staff of Label Television for the production of this newscast. Ladies and gentlemen, as for me, I meet you tomorrow, 12:30 exactly, Central African time. But while waiting, have an excellent week and don't forget, on Label Television, the best is yet to come. Goodbye.